Chapter 4 from The Art of Pastoring by David Hansen. Temptation. As with most of David Hansen's chapters, he began with a fishing story. This time, he wasn't alone. Him and a friend were trying to hike 8 miles to a lake to go trout fishing. The weather turned out to be rainy and cold. Because the cold temperature mixed with rain, they began to get hypothermia. They turned around and started to hike back. Eventually, the clouds broke and the sun came out. They laid in the sun for hours. When they finally warmed up, they noticed they were next to a football field-sized thicket of huckleberries. Instead of bringing home a basket of fish, they instead brought home several baskets filled with huckleberries. As pastors, we end up in the unprotected wilderness many times. Hansen put it this way, unless we wrest control of our lives through religious huckleberryisms, the pastoral ministry is a pilgrimage through the wilderness. He goes on to explain that as pastors, we will go through a form of wilderness fasting our entire lives. We must be willing to surrender ourselves to God and allow Him to guide us. We must let go of the desires to control our environment and allow God to take complete control of our lives. Hansen tells us that the pastor's fast forces us to learn that God provides us with all of our daily bread so that we can be content in all circumstances and in no way have to take control of our own life and destiny. Hansen continues with the wilderness theme. While in the wilderness, there will be many opportunities to take a quick and easy path. Most pastors possess special skill sets that the corporate world will always desire and will be able to use. It would be very easy for a pastor just to give up with what he's doing and to move on and take a job in the corporate world. The pay definitely would be a lot better. Hansen tells us that almost every pastor he knew was tempted to get out, and every pastor will be tempted to break the fast and turn stones into bread. Not only is the temptation to quit is prevalent, but so is the desire to climb the ladder. In the corporate world, ladder climbing is expected. A salesperson's job may start out on the very bottom rung as just a sales representative, and then they may have a goal to continue climbing until they get to manager or maybe even higher. For Hansen, he saw this type of ladder climbing at an early age in the church. First, it was from watching priests want to become bishops. When his family switched to denomination, the ladder climbing continued, but this time, instead of priests becoming bishops, it was pastors and denominational leaders. As a kid, he saw the same type of ladder climbing in church camps. The ironic event that happened to Hansen was that the leader who had the least amount of influence, who had the lowest rung on the ladder, ended up being the person with the least amount of importance, ended up being the most important person in his life, which was his counselor. This obsession for ladder climbing eventually came to an end, and he began to focus on something a little bit different. As he put it, something more captivating than the study of success. Romance bloomed with a beautiful girl. See, he met this girl at church camp, and his focus became on her instead of ladder climbing. And we'll later on in the book find out that the same person ended up being his wife. Finding love was much more beneficial for him than the obsession for ladder climbing. He puts it that sometimes I wonder if a ladder climber's ruin their family lives, or if pastors who have lousy family lives become ladder climbers. See, pastors who are more focused on ladder climbing, they have the ability to end up destroying whatever church they're working at, whether it's a small church or if it's a large church. Hansen tells us that it's not possible for a pastor to have the desire to ladder climb and at the same time be able to have that same desire of love for the church. Eventually, the pastor must make a choice, whether he wants success or he wants love for the church. When making choices, pastors must also be careful that they don't take shortcuts. Hansen says, for me, trying to be a counselor is a shortcut. It's padding to my people's desires to have me to do something for them, rather than admonish them to live through the thick forest of their lives by following Christ in discipleship. It's much easier for a pastor to give a person what they want to tell them, opposed to leading them to what they need. Hansen puts it, since I do discipleship instead of counseling, I find I have a fair amount of free time on my hands, time I can spend praying, instead of focusing on the important parts of being a pastor. Pastors will try to fill their schedules with anything and everything, which then makes them too busy for the important stuff. It's not just the pastors who look for shortcuts, but the parishioners do as well. Hansen says that people don't want to be led, they want to be managed. Being told what to do is much easier than being led to do something. Jesus knew what happened if he left the way of the cross for the cheap shortcut. Hansen says, if he jumped off the temple, he would just crash on the cobblestones below. You see, the devil is a liar. Now, there's a lot of life applications that we can take from this. And for me, I took just a couple of them. And I tailored them more for things that I saw happen in my life and life applications that I used and that I could later on use. In my personal life and struggles, I've been faced with the choice of entering the wilderness or not. For a very long time, I kept avoiding God's call on my life and chose to turn stone into bread. Eventually, I surrendered and started the hike into the wilderness. Although it was only been a short hike so far, Satan has tempted me many times to quit. Money problems would come up, and I would start to think that it may be easier if I went to being a store manager again. Fortunately, God blessed me with the most amazing wife who has helped keep me on the path and stay in the wilderness. As a manager for a retail store, it was much easier to tell my employees what to do. I found out after being a manager for a few years, telling them what to do was easy, but by doing this, I was stifling them. The employees did not grow, and the store's numbers stayed stagnant. It took me a few years and a few good books to discover the difference between being a manager and a leader. When I started to lead instead of managing, I saw my employees take a more active role and a sense of ownership in what they were doing. Not only were they growing, but so was the store. I believe this is true in churches as well. When pastors stop taking shortcuts and start taking the time to lead, the people will grow in Christ, and so will the church. Included are 3 discussion questions. The first is, when in your life had you had to face a temptation to give up on the path God has put you on because the other path seemed so much easier? When has there been a time that you felt that all you really need to do is to make it to the next rung in the ladder, and if you made it there, then you would be satisfied? And finally, what shortcuts have you witnessed in your life?